Now, looking at this artwork, we can see that it is made up of a lot of shapes that are pretty close to the sort of the geometric idea of what that shape is, right? So like if we look at anything, you could break just about anything down into shapes, right? Whether it be a plant or a tree or an animal or like, like a horse or something, just about anything can be broken down into shapes, but that can sometimes be difficult to see them, right? And it can a lot of times be very complex. I've chosen Paul Klee to work from because a lot of his art does have more of simple shapes that are composing it. So that's why I've selected this one specifically, which getting the hang of Adobe Illustrator allows me to work with simple shapes. And if you're choosing to do the same thing, you're going to use some of those same things as you're just starting to learn the tools. So on the left side again, what I'm looking for is my Shapes tool. So right now it's a rectangle, but if I click and hold down, we can see there are some other shapes in here, like the Ellipse tool. You can see here inside of the parentheses, this is the shortcut to be able to select that tool as well. So I can click on it there, right? Or on my keyboard, I can press L, right, as it displays here, and that will also select the Ellipse tool for me. So using this tool, I could try to draw this circle. I can draw a circle two ways. I can click and drag the circle, right? Although that's a little bit hard to see. Right now my outlines are red, and the background of this picture has a lot of red in it. So this color that you're seeing is actually based on the layer color. So if I go back into my layers panel, and I change this color here by kind of double clicking over here, if I double click on this area of the label, I can change the color to something else, like maybe cyan or green. I think green will work well. Now when I try drawing with my circle, now it's a little bit easier to see that, right? So I can draw it this way, I can drag it out, right? And if I hold shift, that will keep it as a perfect circle. If I don't hold shift, it can become more of an ellipse, right? So that's really up to you for what you prefer. Instead, if I click, I can actually put in a very specific amount, right? So here I could specify that I want exactly 250 or 245. Now notice the bottom number is changing in proportion to the top one, right? When I type in a certain amount, this bottom one is changing. If yours is doing that, you have this little link selected, right? So if I break that, then I can do them individually, right? This can be useful when you're trying to create multiple shapes that are all proportional to each other, but maybe different sizes. Now it's really hard to guess exactly what that size is for what I'm trying to do, so I'm going to draw it out instead. So to draw it at about the right size, I'm trying to find sort of the intersect between this top line of the circle and this left line of the circle, so sort of here-ish. And then that gets me pretty close. Now it's not exact, so using the anchor points and my selection tool, my black arrow, I can then try to get it a little bit closer. It's still not exact, and so I can control that a little bit better also using the white arrow, the direct selection tool. His circle here is not a perfect circle, right? So we might have to modify it a little bit. It's not even a perfect ellipse, right? So using this white arrow tool, we can modify these points and the anchors and handles related to them. So it is a little bit hard to see exactly where that line is, right? So I can do a couple things. I can zoom in, and I do think that's a good idea, but I can also change this color, right? Having the inside filled with any color does make it a little bit hard to see the line. So if I double click down here in the toolbar at the bottom, I can change the fill, right? Now this is still a color, and that's not useful. So instead of double clicking there, I want to make sure that the fill is on top, right? So by clicking one or the other, that puts it on top, right? So if this is on top, then down here I can say none. And this makes it a lot easier to see where the edges of Klee's circle is. With my white arrow selected, I can now click on individual points, and I can move them where I think they should go, and I can drag the handle to try to get the circle to look about the way that Klee's does. Now, you don't see all the handles on all the points at once. Instead, you just see the handles that are closest to the point that you have selected. So if I want to modify this over here, then I'm going to need to click over here, and then I can modify that point a little bit and modify the handles associated with that point as well. So this is how Illustrator works essentially. You're not working with pixels the way that you do in other software. You're working with these points and these curves and these shapes, right? So that looks pretty good. If I click off, we can see the outline, right? I don't think that black is very close to what he actually used for this outline. It looks like he probably made a white circle and then put some colored areas inside of it. So I'm going to change this color to white on the outline, so I'll double click the stroke color and I'll make it white. This outline is also very smooth. We talked about how vector graphics are super sharp, right? But that's not his work. His work is pretty rough. So in my panels over here, I have a lot, right? But on this side, I can see the labels and I can choose properties, and that's what I'm looking for. If you don't see properties, you can find it in the windows up here, right? So once again, alphabetical. And here, this stroke, I can change the way the stroke looks. I can change the color here. I can also change the thickness, right? But I can also change what it actually looks like. So here we have stuff like dash lines, arrowheads, profile, but I'm still not seeing exactly what I want. This version of the Essentials workspace doesn't have as many options as some of the other workspaces do. So I'm going to switch this to Essentials Classic, and now I have this whole extra set of properties up here, which includes some strokes around it, right? So I want more of a rough stroke. You can find more. This is just a few. If we click here and you go to Open Brush Library, you have even more options. So instead of just choosing this charcoal stroke, I could select a whole set of different chalk, charcoal, and pencil type ones, and that might get you one more of what you're looking for if you don't like this one. But I'm okay with that one. So now I have sort of this rough outline instead of that super smooth one. Now his circle is filled in, right? So at some point I do want to fill it back in, but then I won't really be able to create the eyes right now. So I'll fill it in later. I'm going to add in the other shapes, and then we'll do that.